Hola, senor e senorita. Welcome to our final La Course on Tête podcast in association with Peloton magazine and our tasty Belgian waffle ride friends. And so, for a final time, Paolo. I'm OJ Borge, as always, a warm embrace to our Aérogramme listeners. And it's done. The final Grand Tour of the season has been put back into its protective case, slightly singed and maybe a little dehydrated. 3 weeks of hardcore temperatures, hardcore racing and hardcore... I can't read my own writing. Looks like a four-letter word that might begin with a P. Hardcore... No idea. Anyway, it was a roller coaster of emotions that ended with Primož Roglič taking his third Vuelta on the bounce. To cock a snook back at the action is Peter Cossins from his Pyrenean eyrie. Hello, Pete.
Hello, OJ.
And Sophie Smith from her Melbourne military stockade, because I believe you're still locked down for a 400th time.
We are still in lockdown. I think that'll be the case till November. So,
well, what are you going to do with it? What do you do around the house all day? Sit-ups, push-ups?
Emotional eating.
Right, gotcha.
Mainly at the moment.
Gotcha. Well, let's talk about this Vuelta then, because Primož, Pete, it was never in doubt. Serenely he went to the title.
It was, I don't know, I mean, we said when kind of in the aftermath of the Tour de France, it was kind of won from the first week. I mean, looking back at this race, I kind of look back to the time trial all the way back in Burgos three weeks or more ago, and I mean, it kind of looked like it was won then. I mean, all right, he lost the red jersey a bit along the way, but he was never really in trouble apart from that one day when he slipped off his bike. And even then he didn't lose any time. So it was pretty serene, yeah.
It was serene. So Sophie, I mean, we on this podcast very much said that maybe he's about to lose it all. I mean, that was just a false dawn, wasn't it?
I think so. I guess, he's not always had the best of luck, Roglič, but particularly at this race, he just seems, and I guess more so as the seasons go on, just so much more confident, not even in his own ability, but just with his position in the peloton, his position in the hierarchy there. I don't think maybe the sort of more relaxed nature of the Vuelta suits him. So the more relaxed he is, you can tell at races he becomes a bit more chatty. And even when he was, falling off at the Vuelta, he still just very much had this, or appeared to have this relaxed demeanour, and everything sort of washed over him. And that goes a big way towards what happens on the bike as well.
What do you think, though, Sophie? Do you think he's more relaxed because he knew he was completely in control and better than everyone else?
I don't know. It could have just been he had a bit of momentum coming in with what happened at the Olympics. He had time to recover from the Tour as well, and had an indication of where his legs were. Like when he came into the Tour, I don't think he'd raced for months. I think his last race coming into the Tour might have been, I can't remember what it was, like the Ardennes Classics. So, and everyone at the time was saying that was quite an unusual approach, even in an era where people sort of train over racing in the lead up to the Tour. So maybe it was a combination of momentum coming in. He'd had some, not a lot, but some racing in his legs, and that confidence from the Olympics. And also, I guess, when you're coming into the Vuelta as the two-time defending champion, that helps out. And a lot of the guys in his team he's raced with for a while, they were at the Tour with him. So it might just be a combination of factors, his form, momentum, confidence, and the nature of that race being more relaxed, perhaps suits his characteristics and just sort of where his head was at as well.
If you look at the final standings, so the podium was Primož Roglič obviously winning it. He won 4 stages on the way to taking the title. Enric Mas came in second from Movistar, 4 minutes 42 down. Jack Haig for Bahrain Victorious came third, 7 minutes 40 down. So Pete, when you look at it, I mean, those are sizable gaps. They are the sort of gaps we were talking about at the Tour de France when we said it was an absolute dominating performance from Pog.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I mean, the gaps are quite similar at the top of the leaderboard, but it's just when you look further down, they're huge as well. I mean, you can see the toll that 3 weeks of, I mean, it's hard racing, but it was in the heat pretty much all the way, and it obviously did take a really big toll at the end of the season on a lot of riders. But I mean, Roglič, like Pogačar, whenever he enters a Grand Tour, or either of them's there, you just kind of think, well, everybody's riding for second or third place because they're just so much more in control, so much sure of themselves. Their teams are extremely strong. They don't look like they're ever going to falter.
So Pete, then, if you take Roglič from this Vuelta, put him against Pogačar from the Tour, who wins?
Pogačar, no doubt. He's just, he just looks extraordinary when he's under pressure. He always seems to find an answer to whatever question's being asked of him. He always looks like he's kind of got a bit more under the pedal than other riders, a bit more in his head maybe, more sure of himself. He is a phenomenon. He really is, and I think he's kind of got a bit of a hoodoo over his compatriot as well. And I think whenever they line up, Pogačar's going to win.
Oh, do you agree, Soph?
They're both very complete bike riders. If that's anything I've taken from this season, especially, they're fabulous time trialists. They're fabulous climbers. They've both got leadership positions. But I do agree to some extent, and also I think because Pogačar's a lot younger, he hasn't, so far as I know, really had a bad day on a bike yet. Whereas Roglič is, he's sort of got an idea maybe of more of an idea of what pain or loss is. So, and I know like the end of the last week of the tour this year, like Jumbo-Visma were speaking about sort of having a hoodoo over people, were very conscious of Pogačar and what he would do in that last time trial, which gives you a bit of an indication of his standing in the proceeding of things. I think they're both very complete bike riders, but at this point, maybe just because of Pogačar's age, he does have this air of invincibility. Maybe because he's a younger man, because he's not.
Don't we all at that age? Because we've not tasted the crushing defeat, and we don't have this resentment built inside of us from so many failures, which is just life if you're on a bike or whatever you do for a living. Do you think that maybe in a year's time, when Pogačar's a bit older, he's on the celebrity circuit at the moment in Slovenia, do you think that maybe he will start to see a world outside of being as dominant as he is, and that might affect him mentally?
That will be the big test, I think. And Alan Piper, who's a sports director who's worked quite closely with Pogačar at UAE Emirates, he said the same thing. He was asked this question at the tour, is he the new Eddie Merckx or whoever, people are constantly compared to. And Alan's response was that he, as long as he's spontaneous, he just likes it, as long as he keeps having fun, this is a playground for him, as long as he keeps having fun, he'll be fine. So I think that the first test, when something goes really wrong for him, when he has a problem like Bernal has had the last 3 seasons, or he has an incident where Roglič has come unstuck or something's just slipped through his fingers, that will be the test.
Well, I tell you what, let's hear from Primož Roglič. He was talking at what was it? Was it the press conference we got this from, Pete?
It was at the end, yeah.
Okay, well, let's hear from Primož Roglič from the press conference.
It's at the end always everything together, and everything goes to the right place. And for me, definitely, I had a bad moments in the tour. It was super nice then at the Olympics, and I came to the Vuelta to do my best. There's nothing in between, and I enjoyed it definitely. And again today was super hard, but at the end the result was super nice, and like I said, I really enjoyed from the start till today, the last day, every day here in Spain.
There you go. Super nice, super hard. P, he enjoyed it. He enjoyed those 3 weeks of hellish temperatures.
He did look like he was enjoying it a lot. I think that was one of the things I took away from the race in general, that there seemed to be, we saw Egan Bernal, or heard him saying after a couple of the stages in the final week, that he really enjoyed it. He enjoyed this Grand Tour because it was just like racing every day, well, especially in the last week when the GC guys really went for each other. I think they all did enjoy it. Kind of, the shackles were off. I think they all knew Roglič was going to win, but that didn't stop them having a go. And Roglič probably enjoyed it more than anyone because of that, because he came out on top.
Is that the vibe of the Vuelta, though? It's the last Grand Tour of the season. It's the end of it. People are trying to either save or do something. Is there a sense of, do you know what? Let's just go and see what happens, rather than the pressure of the tour? I
think it is. I think that's one of the great things about it. That if it all goes wrong at the Vuelta, it's not really a big deal. Obviously you can have a breakthrough result, and we've seen. Jack Haig would be the most obvious example of that, finishing on his first podium, and that's been great for him. And he really was determined to secure that podium place. But a lot of the other guys, Bernal, it didn't really matter. I think we said in the last podcast, it didn't really matter if he finished second or 10th.
Obviously, Jack Haig, who was mentioned there, Sophie, is Australian, so you must know him personally, riding for Bahrain Victorious. When Landa exited the race. I mean, I had high hopes from this time, but I seemed to doom him. He really did step up, didn't he? Bahrain victorious, have managed to swap a leader, swap their priorities really, really well.
Yeah, I haven't spoken to Haig actually throughout the Vuelta, but he's one of those people as well. He's sort of just he's been long touted in Australian circles since he was an under 23, so his talent's always sort of been referred to as he's come through the ranks. But he even in his speech that he gave or press conference when he finished third, just referred to the move to the team, and he's obviously found something there within that structure that's supporting him perhaps in a different way or encouraging him in a different way that he hasn't been before, or he's just come into his own at the right time. But I think for him especially to fill that gap, he said he wasn't even sure if he was going to start the Vuelta. I think 10 days before he wasn't sure if he was coming or going. And when you consider that he fractured his collarbone in a very heavy crash at stage 3 of the tour, which was horrible to watch, let alone suffer the injuries from. I think the fact that he was sort of more impressed that he was there at the start. So the fact that he himself has sort of been able to remedy putting himself up there for GC, and also that the team's been able to respond without Landa there is testament to both of them, really.
One of the facts that's come out of this, I think it was Jeremy Whittle, who's on holiday. We miss him this week. Hello, Jeremy, wherever you are and whatever you're doing. 4 out of the last 6 Grand Tours have now been won by a Slovenian. How long, Pete? How long is this domination going to last?
Well, in terms of Pogačar, it's going to last a long time, I think. Roglič is obviously older, and you kind of guess that he'll have to step aside eventually. I mean, Jumbo-Visma have got younger riders coming through, Wout van Aert, maybe Sepp Kuss. I mean, they're not ready to step into his shoes yet, but they're kind of been readied for those roles. I mean, Jonas Vingegaard as well, who rode so fantastically well at the Tour. But I mean, Pogačar's, it just looks like he could, as long as like Sophie said, as long as he keeps enjoying it, he could race another 6 or 7 years at this level and kind of break all records that have been set at the Tour.
Is that your dog, Pete?
It is my dog.
Is he wanting to answer this question?
My mum's just arrived, so he's in attack mode.
Is it attack or love?
No, he doesn't like people coming to the house.
Have you not told him that your mum was coming round?
No, we didn't tell him. Oh my God, he's coming in now.
What's his thoughts on the Slovenian domination of World Tour cycling?
He's all for it, yeah. He's Spanish, actually, so I think he'd like to see Enric Mas win.
Well, a beautiful segue to Enric Mas, who came second for Movistar, 4:42 down, as we said. The thing is with Movistar, it was all going so well. People were talking for once, Pete, about their remarkable tactics, the fact that they were playing it brilliantly. They had 2 riders possibly going for a podium, maybe more, and then we had a hissy fit.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like it before, OJ.
Have you not? Because I thought I couldn't think of anything, but I was sure something like that must have happened before.
I mean, I look back and I can remember riders climbing off when they're injured and kind of being persuaded to get back on the bike and whatever. That's happened a fair number of times, but somebody actually getting off because they're losing a bike race. I mean, all right, people abandon because they can't win, but I mean, the Superman, as he was before, was
super mad.
Super mad, yeah.
Well, let's go through. Just Sophie, talk us through what happened.
So my understanding of it was that he was on the podium. He was on the podium for overall, and he didn't make a decisive split. So he was trying to chase down the split so he could get back on and save his podium ambitions, obviously. And allegedly, I think from reports I've read, his side of the story was his team told him to stop chasing, which meant his podium would have completely disappeared. And somewhere in there, he's just decided to just stop racing and get off his bike. And then he was apparently on his phone, and that was it. Race done. Climbed into a T car and went away. I don't know if Pete has more information on that than I do. I'm just going on what I've read. But in terms of, I remember Rowan Dennis walking out on the tour a few years ago, and at the time I thought that was unprecedented. We never quite got to the bottom. He referred to mental health months and months later.
Before mental health, wasn't he talking about equipment? He was unhappy with the equipment, wasn't he, Rowan Dennis?
Equipment, yeah. And it was the same thing. It was the day before a time trial, which he was a favourite for. So we never quite got to the end of that. But mean, he wasn't in a position overall. I've not heard of anyone in Lopez's case where he had a chance at his home Grand Tour to stand on the podium. Why? There's a lot of unanswered questions there, actually. Like why his team would have allegedly told him to stop chasing when he was on the podium. It doesn't make sense.
So here you go. So maybe we will learn the truth because Lopez's wife actually did put an Instagram post out. And I'm not sure this is helping the whole situation at all. But the Instagram post, which was in Spanish, and I have a translation, although a statement has been made, someday I hope you learn the real truth. Pete, that's not helping, is it?
No, I mean, it kind of, who knows what was going on, but I mean, you look at the situation that he was in. I mean, when he got dropped, I felt for the guy because, it's one of those things that happened. It was a hard stage. It was kind of like a classic style stage, lots of hills and whatever, and there was just a split. There'd been all kinds of splits before. He was just the guy that had most to lose when it split at that particular point, and he had. He had Egan Bernal sitting on his wheel, had Felix Großschartner sitting on his wheel. They weren't going to help him at all. They just kind of sat there and let him get on with it. You felt bad for him then, but I mean, as the time gap kind of grew out and he started dropping down the rankings from 3rd to 4th to 5th to 6th, I think it was like 7th. He was in 7th place on time by the time he quit the race. Just thought, all right. I mean, it's an awful day for him, but he'd won a stage a couple of days. He'd won one of the biggest stages of the race. Just think, well, we'll just finish. Look at all the work your teammates have done for you, and all the backroom staff and everything. I mean, all right, there might be issues there, but you don't climb off. I mean, it's kind of sport basically. I mean, all right, you feel bad, but get on with it, man.
I mean, because the thing is, though, cycling is an odd sport in the sense that a lot of people have to subdue or put their own personal success aside for the glory of one of their teammates. And the only people who make it to the top level of any sport are people who are competitive and want to be the best. No one goes into a sport to ride for someone else, I wouldn't have thought, especially not into cycling, Pete. So do you think it is just high spirits? Because he's had this before. Was it the Giro where a spectator knocked him off and he threw hands?
Yeah, I mean, he was. It's funny. One of the previous occasions I can remember an athlete retiring was in the middle of a game. Was a boxing match between Roberto Duran and Sugar Ray Leonard in 1990 in Las Vegas, and they got to, I don't know what round it was, but they were pretty evenly matched. Leonard was a bit ahead, and Roberto Duran just turned to the referee and said, "No mas, no more. I'm not going to carry on," and just quit. And it was that same kind of thing of, "What are you doing? You can still win this. It's crazy." And I mean, there have been incidents in cycling before. I remember, well, I don't remember it, but Federico Baumontes in the 60s climbed off his bike one day because he had a fit of pique, and despite people trying to persuade him otherwise, he wouldn't carry on. But I don't know. I mean, you have to question what his future is at that team, because his teammates are going to be thinking, well, are we really going to ride for this guy if we don't actually know what he's going to do? Is he going to finish? It just seems a really extraordinary situation that they find themselves in.
I've got a theory. You ready for this? That they've got a second place on the podium, Movistar, that's all great. But what they really need is another season of their Netflix documentary. So they told him to get off, throw a hissy fit, great TV.
I mean, my mind did go there.
So you thought this as well, Sophie?
I wasn't going to say it, no. I don't know. I wouldn't say he did it for Netflix, but it's got Netflix written all over it, doesn't it? if not a spin-off series.
Is there another season planned of it?
Of the Netflix? I'm not sure. I still think I'm the only person in the world that hasn't seen it.
Me too. I haven't seen it either.
They're doing a series this year, yeah. So I think this is supposed to be the last one, but I mean,
no,
after this,
sequel.
There's got to be another one, hasn't there? We've got to carry on.
So there you go. I'm going to throw that out there, that the reason he did it was for ratings, for TV ratings. Because we live in a world, and EF have proved this, where it's great what you do on the bike, but sometimes it's about how you promote yourself outside of it. And I think they've done a great job of that. Don't we all want to know now?
Yes.
For his sake, I hope so, because if I was one of his teammates and I'm with Pete there, and it's cycling very much is a team sport, and you have to be able to inspire people to ride for you. It's too hard to do on your own. So if he's got a lot of ground to make up, I would say, with his teammates. If there's not a Netflix deal in it for them all.
We've been lucky enough to be sponsored by the guys at the Belgian Waffle Ride for these Vuelta podcasts. And those that know the waffle rides are up there with the most fun you can have on a bike. For those that don't know, well, let's talk to the lord of the BWR. That is Michael Marks. Michael, how are you?
Great. How you going?
All right. And am I right in just thinking I've caught you after taking a group ride of how many people out today?
We had over 300 people show up to go spin around on the bikes.
Yeah, I mean, cycling seems as healthy as it ever has been in America at the moment.
Well, I think when you advertise there's free coffee and free beer, you get every kind of cyclist possible. That's what I did.
Well, that's how it works. I think I'd be there. I'd have been there anyway for you, Michael. So let's talk about the Belgian Waffle Rides. What is the ethos behind them?
Take a 1 hour cyclocross race, expand it to 7 hours, and make people suffer through things that they wouldn't normally suffer through, like water crossings and rocky single track and maybe some road and some gravel thrown in. So it's like a multi-surface thing, but really it's just a really long cyclocross race.
I love the idea of that. You see, obviously, you've piqued my interest right now. That whole, the road less travelled. For those of us who've rode bike for years, I think the fact that gravel riding is opening up, it's making us all feel like kids again.
That's exactly it. It's like the freedom that you felt as a child with a bike and how far you could get away from your parents and the prying eyes of the neighbors and do crazy stuff. Now we can go out and do that and maybe jump a fence that we shouldn't and get on our bike and go, and hopefully they won't shoot at us or chase us down. And there's a bit of adventure there that doesn't include getting hit by a car. And I think there's an allure to both of those things.
Especially as well if you've got kids, because I, have cyclocross race for a while. I'm not very good, Michael. You might not know this, but I think my best ever result was not coming last. But there's lots of families who want their kids to get into cycling, but they are, whether rightly or wrongly, worried about being on the road. So the fact that you run these waffle rides, the fact that you're getting people off the beaten track is important.
It is, and it's important for my wife because I know one time I nearly perished after getting hit by a car on a long ride. And when I eventually got home from the hospital, the first thing that my wife said to me was, "Your son is never riding his bike again." And that was it. That was the last day of his bike riding career.
Right. But is he allowed off-road with you?
He can go off-road now that he's 19. But as a 9 and 10-year-old doing the development program on the track, as you might imagine, is rather intensive, but she had enough of it with my own run-ins with vehicles.
So how long have you been doing the Belgian waffle rides now then?
So it's been over 10 years since the first one. And like I said, back then I had a UCI Pro card to race cross. So I wanted, and I loved long races, and I'm Belgian and I love waffles and Belgian ale. So I thought, well, what kind of a party could I throw for my friends that was selfishly included all the things that I love? So over 10 years ago, we did that. And then we've just nurtured this thing along and made it a little harder, a little longer, a little dirtier every year. And we seem to have captured people's imaginations. Or, there's this wave of gravelness that we're riding to our benefit.
So how many waffles are consumed per Belgian waffle ride?
We have a friend who actually makes the waffles, and every year he threatens he's never going to do it because there's so many more people doing it. And finally this year he threw his hands up and said, "I can't do it. I just don't have enough waffle irons."
My God, how long does it take him to? Because my terrible maths is I'm saying like almost 7,500, 8,000 waffles here per Belgian waffle ride.
Yeah, no, more like 12,000.
Oh, okay.
13,000.
This is why I'm no good at maths, because I immediately realised I'd done that badly. So where are you getting your waffles from?
So we have a friend who's really, really good at making Belgian waffles. And so he started doing it by getting up at 3 a.m. and starting the prep. And then it got to the point where he had to get up at 2. And then it got to the point where he didn't go to sleep. And then he literally started making them the night before, because there's 4,000 athletes with a voracious appetite that feel like their experience must include Belgian waffles before, during, and after the race.
Absolutely. Obviously you're of Belgian heritage. Is that the right way to eat waffles?
It really isn't, but no one here knows that, and no one's had the gall to tell me, "Hey, that's not how we do it." I know that, and all I'm trying to do is get people to enjoy it as best they can in whatever way they can.
They sound amazing. What's the next one and how can people enter it?
Yeah, next one is on the 25th of this month in Cedar City, Utah. They can just go to belgianwaffleride.bike and up pops all the information about that specific race. And then a month later in Kansas, on Halloween, we're hosting a Belgian Waffle Ride in honor of our old friend Steve Tilford, who was a famous cyclist here in the U.S. who lost his life in a car accident a couple years ago. But I used to race with Steve, and he was just a fantastic competitor on the 7-Eleven team back in the day, and just a great guy. And he used to have this fetish with the number 11, so he decided to shorten the race a bit, and it's 111 miles and 11 tenths.
Now, on the last podcast, Sophie, Pete, we talked a lot about Ineos and what they were doing in the race, whether a podium was enough for them. Bernal didn't seem to be going particularly well. Adam Yates, what did you think of Adam Yates' form, Pete? Because it was a bit up and down, wasn't it? I mean, he ended up fourth on the podium, 9 minutes and 6 down on Roglič, but he didn't seem totally in form all the time.
No, I mean, it was odd. I mean, there was a period in the sort of the middle of the second week where he looked far stronger than Egan Bernal, and then just seemed to ebb away from him. Whether it was the heat that was an issue, I mean, it was phenomenally hot down in southern Spain where they were then, and that just got to him. But I mean, Bernal came stronger in the last week, and Yates, I mean, he was making attacks, but. He did almost climb onto the podium, but he did say at the end that he thought it was, I think he's pretty sure in saying it was the hardest Grand Tour that he'd ever done in terms of the effort it expended. So, I mean, it wasn't like he'd left anything out there. He gave absolutely everything.
Well, are you suggesting growing up in Lancashire would not ready you for the hot roads of Spain? Is that what you're saying?
I'm married to a Lancastrian, OJ, so I'm saying nothing.
But you're from Yorkshire. Is that allowed?
I know it's.
Have you alerted the Pennines Council to this?
I know it's a serious problem. We're still in talks about it now.
Wow, it's like the Montagues and the Capulets right there. Well, we talked a lot on the last podcast about Ineos and what they were going to do tactically, and we've spoken to Ollie Cookson, who is a Ineos DS, to tell us exactly why they did what they did in that penultimate stage.
Just going to give a couple of small insights into, in particular, stages 17 and 20, where we as Ineos Grenadiers really tried to open the race and create scenarios to isolate the other GC riders. I think it was we took calculated risks and we were looking for the bigger reward. I think in some ways that definitely paid off, but it was certainly pure, beautiful bike racing. You know, I think we had a reduced team at the time. It wasn't as simple as just pulling on the front. It was really when and how we managed the workload and the damage, so to speak. I think a couple of key factors were just having the clarity of the objective, but the fluidity of moving the tactics depending on the race situation. And yes, if you look at Egan in particular, Giro and Tour winner, and I think he's suffered a lot in this Vuelta. Incredible to be a part of and to see how dedicated he was to not only the race and the results, but also just to the team around him. And I think take my hat off to Egan and of course Adam. I think the willingness of both to attack and take those risks for the bigger reward really opened the race. And I think Adam's well-deserved fourth place. I think it's exactly what we're trying to, what we are doing at the moment, not necessarily trying to. I think it's just we are racers now, and these guys are pure bike racers, and I hope everyone's enjoying the way we are riding from afar. So yeah, hope to see you all on the road soon. Cheers, bye.
So, Sophie, there you go. Ollie Cookson there, who was DSing on the Vuelta. I think it's interesting that and it's not something you would have heard possibly from the previous incarnation Sky, or maybe from the earlier days of Ineos, where they were happy to roll the dice and make a calculated risk for the bigger prize.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest takeaway, and this is something they've been purporting all year, was that they were going to have to move from that sort of previous Grand Tour racing mindset where they were in control and riding defensively. And I know there's been a lot of conjecture as to like their tactics at the Tour and the Vuelta this year, but I agree with Ollie. I think they set out to do, in terms of racing and how they approached the Vuelta, they they set out, they achieved what they wanted to do. And he's just said it there. They did race really aggressively. They did take calculated risks. They did, like particularly in that third week of the Vuelta, sort of just throw it all out on the line, which in previous years they might not have taken risks like that or be in a position where they had to. So I think it is exciting. It sounds like I'm sort of eating up the party line there a little bit, but I enjoyed the way they raced, and they often at the Vuelta and sometimes at the Tour made it actually very difficult for the other GC teams, not always to their own benefit, but they did contribute, I think, a lot towards the battles on the road, especially at the Vuelta.
I was a bit sceptical about when they came out at the start of the year and said we're going to race in that way, but they've kind of been left with no choice because, apart from at the Giro, where Bernal was by far the strongest rider, they've had to try and create opportunities, and other teams have as well. They're not the only team trying to do that, but they've had to try and upset Pogačar at the Tour and now Roglič at the Vuelta. I think they made a good go of it. I mean, they've certainly spiced up the last week of the race. Ollie Cookson talked about stages 17 and 20, and they were the particular ones where they tried to kind of blow the whole race apart, and they succeeded in that. I mean, they were the ones that kind of ended up forcing Lopez out of his third place and almost putting Yates on the podium. That gave Jack Haig in the end a leg up onto the podium instead. But I mean, it's great to see. I think that's what we want to see in Grand Tours. We don't want to see this kind of riders waiting until the last possible moment on climbs and attacking. We want to see these big attacks from like 60 kilometres out that Bernal tried, and they were trying on the penultimate stage.
So here's the question then. With all that in mind, watching what happened in 17 and 20 and the race in total and Roglic's domination, Sophie, was it a good Vuelta?
I think so, yeah. I really enjoyed it. I think you had sort of proper, despite everyone sort of, going in or saying or believing that Roglič was the man to beat, and he was in the end, and I think he won 4 stages en route. But still, there was still a race. Jumbo-Visma still raced, and we haven't really spoken about it, but Fabio Jakobsen always winning the stages he did, and then also taking the green jersey. I think that happened 364 days after he suffered that life-threatening crash at the Tour of Poland. So there are a lot of different storylines at this Vuelta where I think we have it that were really enjoyable to watch and to report on. And I agree, I don't know if it's just because of the more relaxed atmosphere at the Vuelta. I don't know if it was just a combination of the teams that were there. But they really did race this year. There were some days where I think we said in the last podcast where the break wasn't going till 80 or 100 kilometres, into a stage. So it was good to see. It was really proper racing.
I'm glad you mentioned Fabio Jakobsen, because I was going to ask you for your favourite moment of the Vuelta. Was that it, when he crossed over the line knowing he'd taken the green jersey with three stages with it?
I think so. For me, it would have been, yeah. And it's more of a humanitarian story as well. Like I wrote for La Course on Tête that crash at Poland last year, we see bad crashes in cycling, but that one was quite devastating, and the effect it would have also had, not so much of a physical effect on Dylan Groenewegen, but that is the kind of crash that, Jakobsen was in an induced coma after that. He had to have his face reconstructed. And, Groenewegen, for his involvement, was like receiving death threats at his home. It was one of those crashes where I actually feared that neither of those two men would come back from it, either physically or mentally. I honestly think it was almost a year to the day for Jakobsen to do what he did at the Vuelta. Even just to be back on his bike and in the bunch again and racing in the conditions they do, at high speed, shoulder to shoulder. I thought that was great to see.
Absolutely that. The one thing I'd like to add on top of it, because yes, it was great what we're talking about there and Roglič, was seeing Wanty Gobert, one of the smaller teams in the pro peloton, and Odd Christian Eiking wearing the leader's jersey. And it wasn't just one day, Pete. They defended it for a few days and did a good job of it, and it was great to see.
Yeah, they've had a great year, Antomache. I mean, they had a stage win at the Giro, which people will remember, I'm sure, Taco van der Hoorn, because his celebration was just so fantastic, so over the top, and his surprise and whatever. It was just glorious. And then they've come here and they've done a similar thing. I mean, I felt really bad because they had Eiking in the red jersey, and they had Louis Meintjes, who struggled for quite a few seasons now with injury and lack of form, and he was kind of on the verge of the top 10, probably would have finished in the top 10, and unfortunately crashed out 2 or 3 days from the end and didn't finish. But still, they had a fantastic race. I mean, I don't know how they rate in terms of budget compared to the other teams in the World Tour, but they're probably kind of in the relegation zone, for want of a better phrase. They're right down at the bottom, and they've just done phenomenally well all season, I think.
You love to see it. So the Grand Tour season, let's take the 3 Grand Tours. Giro d'Italia was won by Egan Bernal. Tour de France, Tadej Pogačar. I'm going to say his name properly at some point. I know I am. It's going to happen. Vuelta a España as won by Primož Roglič. Riders with the most stage wins, Mark Cavendish and Primož Roglič, 4 each. Teams with the most stage wins. What do you think it is? Which team across the 3 Grand Tours won the most stages, Sophie?
Deceuninck Quickstep.
How many?
8. 12 to 15?
9.
9.
You were in the
Okay,
ballpark.
overestimated. Okay.
In the ballpark.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, looking at the Grand Tours of 2022, what do you think we can expect?
I think Jack Haig now will have very much so have a taste for stepping up on the podium, and the Giro and the Tour are very different races to the Vuelta, but I think that'll be that his result at this Vuelta will be a turning point in his career. And they've also just been, throughout the Tour, they've been more and more competitive, I think, this season, and quite diverse within that. So they're, for me, one to watch.
Well, there you go. We aren't done for the season. We'll be back for some Roubaix action and looking ahead to the World Champs. What does the Flanders course look like, Pete? Who do you think is going to win that, the World Champs?
Good question. That is a good question. I was talking to someone about that the other day, and it kind of, you kind of think Flanders, and you think, well, it's going to be Wout van Aert or Mathieu van der Poel or perhaps Julian Alaphilippe, and they'll certainly be among the favourites, I'm sure. But there's like 50k, I think, off the last climb into the finish, which is flat. And so I don't know. I mean, it could be a sprint, which maybe, I mean, any of those 3 guys could win a sprint, especially Van Aert and Van der Poel, but it's pretty open, I think.
Thank you very much to Pete and to Sophie. Many thanks to our Aérogramme listeners as well as our sponsors, the Belgian Waffle Ride. Guys, thank you for listening. Make sure you check out LaCourseOnTête.com for more writing, and also Peloton socials for more of that sort of stuff. And until the cobbles, adios.
Via, via, vieni via di qui. Niente più ti lega a questi luoghi, neanche questi fiori azzurri.